Hi, my name's Michelle. I'm one of the librarians at the Hayward Public Library, and welcome to our Season of Hope Readathon. Today I'm going to read you a children's book called The Goblin and the Empty Chair. It's by Mem Fox, who's one of my absolute favorite children's authors, and the illustrators are Leo and Diane Dillon. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous book. So we will start right here. In a time long past, in a land far away, there lived a goblin who had once seen himself reflected in a still pond. His reflection frightened him so much, he decided to hide his face from the world forever so as not to frighten anyone else. He kept himself to himself, took care not to be seen, and spent many years alone. But one day, the goblin happened to see a farmer sigh, set down his tools, and bury his head in his hands. That night, the goblin went to work. He dug where digging was needed, he chopped where chopping was needed, he painted where painting was needed, and he was careful not to be seen. But, in spite of his care, the goblin was seen. The farmer, unable to sleep, stared out into the dark and watched without a word. The following day, on the very same farm, the goblin saw a woman sigh, set down her pail, and bury her head in her hands. That night, the goblin went to work. He watered where watering was needed, he planted where planting was needed, he pruned where pruning was needed, and he was careful not to be seen. But in spite of his care, the goblin was seen. The woman, unable to sleep, stared out into the dark and watched without a word. The following day, on the very same farm, the goblin saw a child sigh, set down her book, and bury her head in her hands. That night, the goblin went to work. He sat where sitting was needed, he soothed where soothing was needed, he stayed where staying was needed, and was careful not to be seen. But, in spite of his care, the goblin was seen. The child woke, kept very still, and watched without a word. In the morning, the child, the woman, and the farmer sat silent at their table, staring at the chair that had been empty all winter. Finally, the woman set a place in front of the empty chair. The farmer filled a plate with food. The child opened the door, and they waited. The goblin waited too. There he is. And longed to join them, but he dared not show his face, lest it should frighten them away. So he stayed where he was. At last the farmer sighed and rose from the table without a word. The woman followed, and the child made to follow as well. "Wait," said the goblin, "wait." So the farmer and the woman and the child sat down again, and the goblin came and sat in the empty chair. They looked at one another and smiled. And they began to eat. And that's the end. This story gives me hope because whenever we teach children lessons like this about how kindness is the best way to take care of yourself and make yourself feel better, and about how we can make families for ourselves when we don't have families or when our families are broken. Whenever children learn lessons like this, it gives me hope for the future because we're raising them to be the kind of adults that we need in our world. Thank you. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.